You're most welcome, viewers. This is the class of postgraduate diploma in procurement and supply chain management, class of 2023 of Uganda Management Institute. Members, here's Mapesa Toba Tofiti with my colleagues Jane Catherine, Anointed Conrad, Ngolobe Samuel, and Angoram Rispa. Members, we are going to bring and discuss with you the challenges organizations have been facing during the pandemic, and we're going to discuss basically how they're able to navigate and survive during the pandemic through global value chains. Members, as you all know, the pandemic of COVID-19 was a hit to most organizations, which led to a number of organizations to think twice. We're experiencing constraints in getting goods and services from one point to another. So members, during the pandemic of COVID-19, organizations had to engage into GVCs, what we call the global value chains, as we shall explain with time. So this pandemic, members, really put a constraint on the global value chains. Global value chains basically mean that organizations or countries collaborating together to see that they can achieve what they want to minimize costs in the of experts, or like in a way that they can minimize costs. So to put you in light what really happened during the pandemic, you may realize that a number of organizations dropped out. In Uganda alone, 13 of the 16 airline operators who were in Uganda dropped out of the International Air Travel Agency, which led to a total loss of $1.2 billion in dollars. So members, we are basically going to bring to you how basically organizations were able to overcome such challenges during the pandemic and how far they navigated to survive. Thank you, members. Let's have Mr. Anointed Conrad take through how organizations were able to, what lessons they learned during the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tolbert. And I will take you through the lessons learned from COVID-19 pandemic and the way they affected the global value chain organization. Of course, as we see, global value chains are cross-border networks that bring product or services into from conception to the market. And some of the lessons which we are learned, we have needed to create more revenue streams. Most of the organizations or global value chain organizations, we are relying mostly on one single source of income. And with time or in the event of closure, we saw need for them to have other alternatives, so that because if in the case of closure, we would have no supplies, for example, for companies which are in production and other resources which were limited by the blockade of movement. And therefore, creation of more revenue streams was an important lesson for most of the organizations. For example, M-Copa, one of the companies primarily in the solar industry in Uganda, embarked on other revenue streams, including selling of smartphones in partnership with MTN on credit. Then the next lesson was supplier diversification. Instead of relying on a single supplier or suppliers, it is important that most of the global value chain organizations have several suppliers in place, so that in case of closure or where there is limits to movement, or where the supply chain is not doing well, we can have alternatives. Also, we could look into local production or local suppliers giving us these items which would be necessary for the production to go in. For example, in Uganda, the bakery, hospitality, and food supplies import grain from countries like Poland, Argentina, Russia. However, like during the COVID-19, there was no access because of the quarantine and also the closure of the borders. and therefore it is important that other alternatives for supply would have helped in this case. Then also another issue is lesson which was learned is ease of accessibility to resources. Being able to stay agile, ensuring team members have access to resources. Just as Roger Dongman at Forbes explains, duplicating your resources means you are making them accessible from multiple locations. And this process may include digitizing files and getting them on cloud, which is accessible from anywhere on the internet. We also this happening in COVID-19. You do not have to rely on a physical place of work, and you can have work being done even when you're not at the physical place of work. For example, in Uganda, most of the privately owned firms and government agencies resorted to their employees working online, and therefore, this was a lesson learned. Thank you very much for that, and may the next presenter please proceed. Thank you.
Picking up from where Conrad has stopped, the other lesson learned is a need for technological and blockchain technology adoption. So we look at global value chains. They have learned that the use of technology, as the use of Microsoft Teams, Zoom, Google Meet, for information sharing, interaction, meetings with stakeholders and conferences, just like the way we are doing. So the use of that of one of the drive and box to store and manage data. So we're looking at sharing information and also work on documentations at the same time in different locations. That is like online archives. So the pandemic also forced many small businesses, firms to establish or expand their online strategies, e-commerce, and also social media that have been significant components of successful business strategies for years. So we're looking at those that have not completely embraced this technology before COVID-19. They have also learned that now it is critical for them to sell their products during lockdowns and for getting important messages out of their customer base. So when we quote the president of East Africa, Asia, and Pacific region, that is World Bank, Madam Victoria Kwaka, said that pandemic may also encourage local firms to adapt to new technologies and upgrade their businesses models. So for instance, if the lockdown of workers might raise incentives for companies to automate certain functions and encourage digitalization and use of online platforms. The other point is improved and enhanced risk mitigation and management. So we look at how firms have learned that they can manage risks while engaging in global value chains is very necessary for organizations, especially for those that have critical and bottleneck items. So to ensure that efficient management of the risks, and firms are resorted to certain mitigation risk plans. So in case of the risks occur, the third parties, such as the insurance companies, they could reduce the impact of the risk by regular reviews and to direct new changing risks and also undertake appropriate risk options. So the lesson that we have mentioned on here, it can be somewhat be hard to learn, and in other cases, even harder to implement for some reasons of others. So one has to be positive about the pandemic. It is a wake-up call, and it is also provides the business owners worldwide. So business and corporations worldwide will take what they have learned from 2020 and make themselves better equipped to deal with the future scenarios that will have something in reference of them. That is all from my end. Thank you.
So I'm taking on the different strategy options that organizations would use to avert or to demise now or in future the similar consequences the pandemic of COVID-19 caused. And my first point would be to exploring alternatives for multi-sourcing. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, many organizations have now gone to dual sourcing because it was very risky to source from one supplier. An example of is a company called Cisco Systems, which has averted to dual dual sourcing so that to reduce the risk of the pandemic caused in the first place. My next point is investment in supply chain technology. As we all know, the supply chain to be successful, it has to have people, processes, and technology working together. But due to the COVID-19 pandemic, many people were laid off from work or due to the quarantine. So it was difficult. It was very difficult to manage people and processes. But investing in technology, because technology could replace the people and is streamline the process to work, which I say investing in blockchain and supply chain technology is a way key strategy to improve the supply chain, or to improve the supply chain globally, and to reduce the risk of processes. That is my point. My colleague should take on from that.
Thank you so much. I'll continue from here. The next plan we can have as supply chain, as organizations, could be developing a supply chain resilience, stroke a business continuity management strategy. Resilience refers to the ability of organization to react to problems and disruptions without interrupting the normal flow of the systems. During this COVID pandemic, organizations learned to always develop supply chain systems which are robust enough and can withstand disruptions. For instance, this even entails doing a bit of some dummy runs here and there to make sure that some socials, maybe some effects, to make sure that we implement a plan to ensure availability of a workforce, availability of raw materials, availability of everything we need to ensure everything goes well despite disruptions in the global value chain. The next point would be organizations can rather enhance cross-functional collaboration, whereby different departments are working in tandem, are working together to make sure that everything goes well despite the disruptions. Like you saw that in pandemic, some organizations had some staff who were not present. Some staff were probably having sick leaves and the rest due to the COVID-19 pandemic. But organizations had to make sure that each department works together or covers up some departments so that the gaps are filled and everything can keep on running smoothly despite the disruptions. We may also entail having systems like ERP, which ensure that there is seamless flow of information between one department to another. So the COVID pandemic kind of like taught organizations to work together and the different departments so that there is one functional and full team to work together and make sure they counteract the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. Maybe my colleague can come in from there.
Thank you, Sam, and the submission. Lastly, we would just want to say that this has been at the core of discussion among government and business leaders during the time of COVID-19, that all organizations and countries should just shift toward more sustainable and resilient global value chains. What we mean here is that we should develop networks which can be able to withstand such impacts like COVID-19 did to us during the time of 2020, where most of everything, structures and systems were crippled. So we as developing countries, Uganda inclusive, along with our neighbors, Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, and Rwanda, we should therefore take steps to integrate more fully into global value chain systems, which could help us cushion this kind of negative impact to our economy. Members, thank you so much. In conclusion, we just want to say that we did an excellent research, and we believe that for us as a developing country and also small-scale enterprises, that once we engage in global value chains, we shall be able to overcome such pandemics like COVID-19 did during the time of 2020. Thank you so much.
Thank you.